Hi, welcome to the code-dispenser channel. I'm Paul and today is another brief, this time regarding the use of focus traps in our Blazor applications. First of all, what is a focus trap and why should we use one? Quite simply, it's a web accessibility technique designed to capture keyboard navigation of focusable elements and to confine this navigation to a certain area. The canonical use case is that of a modal dialog, where without a focus trap, a keyboard-only user, such as a visually impaired user, may tab out of the modal without realizing it, causing confusion and frustration. I myself am guilty of not adding them in the past, as it wasn't until my 10th year as a programmer, circa early to mid-2010s, that I learned of them. As a sighted mouse user, it was just something that never dawned on me. This video takes a look at how you can create a focus trap as a Blazor component with or without JavaScript. All of the code shown is available to download from my GitHub repository, the link of which is in the video description below. Let's get started. Currently we are in a .NET 8 Blazor interactive server application, but it could have been an interactive auto or WebAssembly project. This is the Razor code file for the home page. On it we just have 4 buttons which do the following. The first button just opens a test modal dialog without a focus trap. The second button opens the same modal dialog, this time wrapped in a focus trap component that was built without any JavaScript calls. The third button opens the dialog wrapped in a focus trap component that takes a hybrid approach, using the Blazor keypress events but making calls to JavaScript to set the focus on the first and last focus enabled elements within the dialog. The last button uses a focus trap component that takes this one step further and uses JavaScript to handle both the keyboard events and the focusing. I deliberately created them all so you could see the differences in approach and to help you get started if you wanted to create your own. My first Blazor focus trap wasn't a component per se, it was calls to JavaScript directly from my modal dialog and service. The newer one is simplified by use of such components. All 3 of the dialog instances have had a handler attached to the onClose event to toggle the show dialog variable that is used. Let's take a quick look at the test modal. As you can see, it's just a simple dialog that was created to be used for the tests. Although we are wrapping this modal component within the focus trap components as shown on the home page, we could have put the focus trap component inside the modal dialog component as indicated by the commented out code. There isn't anything much of interest other than the event raised when the close button is pressed, handled in the home page as already mentioned. Let's run the app before discussing the code that was used. The focus is currently on the first button. I am only going to use the Tab and Shift keys for navigation. Let's press the Enter key to open the modal. Look at the focus going down the other buttons as I use the Tab key to get to the dialog content. We could have made this a little better by placing the dialog component immediately below the button. This, however, would not stop us going on and then off the modal dialog as we continue to use the Tab key. I will Shift Tab to get back and close the modal. Let's open the dialog that has the Blazor only focus trap. The dialog is open and we have trapped the focus. However, without JavaScript we cannot set the focus to the first focusable element within the dialog, so currently we are in a div within our focus trap that has a tab index. Pressing the tab will then take us into the dialog content. After the close button, we are back again at the div within our focus trap that has the tab index. Pressing the tab again gets us to the content. I will use Shift Tab to get back and close the dialog. Now let's open the hybrid focus trap that uses Blazor to handle the key presses and JavaScript directly to set the focus within the dialog content. As you can see, the main difference between this and the previous focus trap is that we are immediately taken to the content without having to press the Tab key. I will now tab as normal and then Shift Tab to go back and close the dialog. There are no pauses as we are not stopping on the divs within our focus trap. The last focus trap has no divs within it and uses JavaScript to handle both the keyboard events and for setting the focus to within the dialog content. To the end user, the behavior is identical to the previous focus trap. Let's close the browser and discuss the code that was used. First, the Blazor only focus trap. If we look at the HTML markup, we can see we have 4 inner divs with tab indexes. The outer divs are responsible for catching the focus and then sending it to the appropriate inner div. As mentioned, we cannot get to the dialog content, which is populated by the child content render fragment, without JavaScript. All we can do is to stop on an index just before the content. At first it may seem odd having 4 divs. Pressing the tab key on the top div will catch the event and then set the focus to the top inner div. If the shift and tab key were used, focus would be set to the bottom inner div, and vice versa for the bottom outer div. The inner divs have a tab index of -1, meaning that in normal use tabs would not stop on the div. However, they do stop when set programmatically. As a side note, in a lot of my web projects I make use of the CSS outline property and sometimes apply it to the div element directly. Depending on your usage, you may want to add an inline style to the divs within the focus trap to turn off any borders or outlines to prevent any issues caused by styling. The only thing in the code that you might find odd is the checks within the onAfterRender event. This was the only pain point in creating all of the components. When the focus trap component is on a page or inside a component that is visible to the DOM, i.e. it is not wrapped within an if statement that either includes or excludes the content, then we do not want the focus to be set on the initial render, as at that point the modal will not have opened. Conversely, if the component is within an if statement along with the modal, then we want the focus to be set on the first render along with the dialog being opened. If we put the focus trap inside the dialog component but outside of the show hide if block, then the focus would need to be set on the second render along with the opening of the modal. This was the best solution I came up with that ensured that the focus traps would work in either scenario. Looking at the onParameter set event, I toggle the tab index of the outer divs to ensure that they are bypassed when the trap is in a disabled state. Let's now look at the first focus trap that uses a bit of JavaScript. The HTML markup is exactly the same as the previous focus trap, as we are still using the Blazor key press events. The only real difference with this focus trap is that we are now importing a JavaScript module that contains a setFocus function used to find and set focus to either the first or the last focusable element within the dialog. We can achieve this by simply passing the focus trap element reference directly to the function for it to use as a starting point, along with an offset to account for the focusable divs within our focus trap. Let's move on to our final focus trap that uses JavaScript for both the keyboard events and for setting the tab focus. There isn't a lot to say about this code, it merely acts as a wrapper for the JavaScript, getting the module and again providing the focus trap element reference as an argument value for the JavaScript functions. In this instance, the element reference is also provided to the functions used to add and remove the keyboard event listeners. Finally, we come to the TypeScript code used to produce the JavaScript module. The first line of code is just a constant that we can use for our query selectors to find the focusable elements. This is used within the setFocus and keydown event handlers to find the tabbable children within our focus trap. The setChildFocus function makes use of the offset to adjust which element gets the focus, taking into account the focusable divs within the focus trap, which are included within the query results. The toFirstChild Boolean argument is just to indicate whether we want the focus set to the first or the last focusable element. As we have no child divs in our JavaScript only focus trap, the keyboard handler just uses the first and last focusable item it finds. In this instance, using our demo as reference would be the first input field and the close button. It then just sets the focus to the appropriate element depending on whether a tab or shift tab combination was detected. There isn't much else to discuss, as hopefully the code is self-evident. If there is anything you are unsure about, please feel free to leave a comment on either YouTube or GitHub, and I will do my best to answer. One last thing about the usage of the focus traps discussed. Given the render process and whether or not focus should be set on the first or second render, to ensure the correct behaviour, you should use a variable for the disable parameter, toggling it between true when it is disabled and false when it is in use, as of the demonstration. This way the component can toggle its internal focus set variable if the focus trap has not been disposed after use, i.e. in the demo the homepage buttons can open and close the dialogues multiple times without ever being disposed, as any disposals would not occur until you move to another page. In cases where you cannot set the disable parameter and the focus trap should set focus on the first render, then you can just set the disable parameter value to false, but you should ensure that the focus trap is disposed. My new dialog service uses this approach. When the dialog is closed, both the dialog and focus trap go out of scope and as such are disposed. So it's a new instance of the focus trap each time the modal is shown. Well, I think that's about it for this video, as there is nothing more I can add other than to say go download the code and run it. If you did find this video and or the provided source code helpful, please consider supporting the channel. Ko-fi links and the GitHub repository links are in the video description below. Until next time, bye for now.